Hi, I'm Ellie. That's me as a baby. Me in a tracksuit. Me talking to a monkey. Me at Butlins and me as a teenager. I lost a lot of people in my late teens and early 20s. I lost my mum, my dad and my brother Jonathan. And I felt really isolated and didn't know where to go for support. In my experience, grief can be hard and messy, and I can't imagine how much harder that would have been in a global pandemic. The arrival of COVID-19 has profoundly disrupted people's experiences of bereavement. Lack of physical contact with loved ones at the time of death, restrictions surrounding funerals, and the fact that many COVID deaths were sudden or unexpected has been really distressing for bereaved people.
I feel resentment towards the pandemic for robbing me of the last 5 weeks of my mum's life. Whilst I was able to visit her the morning she passed away, holding her hand through a nitrile glove, and being unable to kiss her one last time due to the full PPE head mask was difficult to cope with. As much as I cherish being allowed to see her in her final few hours.
A team of researchers headed up by Emily Harrop from Cardiff University and Julia Selman from the University of Bristol set out to find out more about what happened, what support people needed, and what the barriers were for people bereaved during the pandemic. Before COVID, most people, 60% in fact, got through their grief with support from friends alone, without needing more formal support from bereavement services. How has support changed since March 2020? Are people still going to their friends and family, or are they reaching out for more formal support? Emily, Lucy and the team of researchers asked 711 bereaved people about their experiences. They reach people through social media, charities, community organisations and word of mouth. All kinds of people responded, from 18 to 90 years old. People who'd lost parents, grandparents, siblings, children, colleagues, friends, family and chosen family. What we found out. Only a third of bereaved people had been given information about bereavement support services. People who lost loved ones at home or in a hospice generally had better experiences around the time of death than people in care homes and hospitals. Most people felt lonely and isolated following the death, but this was especially true for those whose partner or spouse had died and those whose loved one died of COVID-19. People struggled to express their feelings to friends and family, and this was made harder by physical isolations, lockdowns, and restrictions to ceremonies and remembrance rites.
Other people don't want to keep hearing it. And some people believe COVID is a hoax or conspiracy. It's heartbreaking to have to listen to that crap continuously. People look at you like you're lying if you say mum died of COVID. The ignorance out there, it's stifling sometimes.
A difference between the amount of support on offer and the amount of help needed were known about before COVID hit, and were only magnified throughout 2020 and into 2021. The research team identified 6 main themes related to getting support, and what was getting in the way of people getting the help they needed. 3 themes around accessing counselling and other services, and 3 relating to getting informal help from friends and relatives. Accessing professional support. When getting help from counsellors or bereavement services, People struggled with the availability of appropriate support, with it either not being available, people needing face-to-face support really, and a lack of help that supported specific communities and cultures. Sometimes the timing of help had particular conditions, and people found they weren't eligible. People spoke about unreturned calls, long waiting lists, and being in the wrong postcode to get help. Some people couldn't get through to helplines.
Some people had good experiences with over-the-phone and online support, but it could be uncomfortable discussing things remotely. People juggling homeschooling and home working with their families had problems finding quiet and private space to talk to someone. People wanted specific support with people who shared similar experiences, for example, LGBTQ communities and people who'd experienced child loss.
People struggled with knowledge and attitudes towards support, including people not knowing where to get more information or who to contact. Some people felt that counselling and other services wouldn't help. Many people reported feeling uncomfortable seeking help or feeling like other people had it worse and they weren't entitled to support. This was particularly true for people who lost parents or older relatives to long-term illnesses.
I feel awkward making a phone call to say that I'm struggling, especially as a couple of months have passed since she died. I had hopes that time would settle things down. It has to an extent, and now it seems too late to seek help. No one offered or directed me to any support either, so I wondered if it's not actually available.
People found the timing of support difficult, and some people didn't have faith that asking for support would help them. There were also a number of logistical barriers in getting support from GPs, including difficulties getting appointments, trouble with signposting and referrals, and the type of support provided not being suitable.
I am having difficulties coming to terms with my loss. GP can only offer medication or helpline advice, which has not helped much. I need company, really.
Accessing support from friends and family. Difficulties connecting and communicating with friends and relatives. People did still lean on informal help, but it was significantly harder when in-person meetings and physical touch between people from different households were forbidden. Lockdowns and social distancing put a huge strain on relationships, and people were worried about being a burden. Parents or those homeschooling felt a real pressure to stay strong.
I haven't really sought support from family as they're affected too. We talk about Dad in a positive way and joke about him as well. This helps. I couldn't seek support from friends. What would I ask them? No idea. I suppose what could happen is we get a bit drunk together and I get a few things off my chest. This isn't likely to happen in times of COVID.
I think working through the anger and sadness I feel about how Mum died and what we've consequently suffered in terms of loss of normal grief rights, for example, I've still not hugged my dad or my sister, is something that I need more help with now. And I think the government has failed to take account of the damage done to bereaved families by not making allowances for them to have bereavement contact during lockdowns. Crying on Zoom is just not the same. All I wanted when Mum first died was to get out of this house and go and have a cup of tea with a friend. I've been stuck in the house most of this year and for a long time with my husband and kids, homeschooling. Had no escape and nowhere to go.
The pandemic disrupted the grieving process and made it feel surreal and harder to accept. A daughter described it as a constant prolonging of a goodbye. Some people felt grieving families should have been allowed to meet during lockdowns.
Just not being able to hug and be in the same room. After the funeral, I would have liked to have been in the room with my mother's friends, my friends and family, sharing memories and stories, crying and laughing. For a while, I thought I would still organise a wake after COVID, but now I think that the moment has passed and that ritual will be missing too.
A lack of understanding and empathy. People felt their friends and family were awkward talking about the person who'd been lost, changing the subject or implying they should have moved on. Phone calls to check in faded away as the days went on. There have been almost 6 million deaths from COVID-19 recorded so far, and an estimated 53 million family members and friends have been bereaved due to COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. Since 2010, I've been creating spaces for people to talk about their experiences of grief. I can relate to lots of the feelings from the research, and I've seen firsthand how the pandemic has intensified all those feelings of loss, anger, injustice, loneliness, and it was just really disempowering for people, where I am in Leeds and right across the UK. At times, I felt like the scale of how much grief there was totally overwhelming. I still feel that on some days, but what the research did was make a number of recommendations. Here are 3 main recommendations to help people get support. They could be implemented in big and small ways by individuals or organisations or communities. It doesn't undo or reverse the pain people have gone through, but it does allow us to act at whatever scale we can to improve the future for people still living with grief from the pandemic. One, we need more help and support, and of different kinds to suit different people. This needs to happen locally and on a larger national scale. We need safe ways to access face-to-face support for individuals and groups, as well as online and telephone support, with specific support available for groups with shared experiences and characteristics. 2, improving awareness of bereavement support, including proactively providing information to relatives following a death and ensuring accessible public information is available online and in community settings. GPs and other care providers should be better resourced to signpost bereaved people to appropriate support. 3, more help with loneliness and isolation, including flexible support bubble arrangements for people who've recently been bereaved when restrictions are in place. Educational and society-level initiatives are needed to improve the culture of how we communicate and support people experiencing death, dying and bereavement. Despite the challenges of being bereaved during the pandemic, grieving people and communities significantly impacted by COVID have shown incredible resilience. Lots of amazing work has been done at grassroots level in neighbourhoods and on social media, and locally and nationally by charities and healthcare providers. Perhaps a silver lining of the terrible losses of the pandemic is that death and grief have been brought centre stage. What can each of us do to help create a positive legacy and honour the lives of all those who have died? It's important to keep talking and raise awareness of the impact bereavement can have. For more information, resources and support, visit covidbereavement.com.